Well, welcome back, Mom.
Good morning, Robert.
Yeah. So this week, it'll be your turn to share.
Yes.
And you had mentioned a little bit before we started the podcast that there's going to be a little bit of work required or some assembly required.
Yes. We're doing things just a little bit different. And I really struggled with this last night because I found myself like forcing an ending to this subject, but I didn't want it to just be like, well, this can work here. I wanted it to be more organic with the topic that I'm going to be talking about.
Okay.
And
what's the topic you're talking about?
I was going to say, and I appreciate your participation. But what I'm talking, the topic, I labeled it, whose words are more important? Okay. When you're in a conversation and both parties are not feeling heard, whose words ultimately end up being more important? So, and I wanted to go over and kind of explain the scenario.
Okay.
And then where I got stumped is, where do we go from here? So I did find a little quiz that we're going to be doing to try to help us find the answer.
Okay.
So it's kind of like a little backstory is communication is very new to me. You know, I was very shut in. I wasn't a good listener, and I was easily triggered. And I feel like I have been working, I know I personally have been working really hard on it, and I feel like I've been making strides. But a scenario happened here recently with Brandon and I, and it wasn't an argument. It was just something where neither one of us, there was no ending to the solution of the argument.
Okay.
And it wasn't really an argument. It was more of a situation, but it was over a sandwich. And I had gone and I had picked up some sub sandwiches, and Brandon is very particular about what he wants on his sandwich.
Yes.
So I gave the lady the order. I come home and there was mayonnaise on Brandon's sandwich. And he was like, I don't like it. I'll just give it to Robert. But I was like, no, to me, it's worth the 15, 20 minutes to drive back to the store to be like, hey, you made this sandwich wrong. Make it right. And he's like, no, just, it's not that big of a deal. Don't do it. And I'm like, I want to do it. And he's like, you're not listening to my words. And then I'm like, you're not listening to mine. And it was like a stalemate. And it really got me to thinking, like, all week, like, whose words should have been listened to in that scenario. I mean, Brandon had a very valid thing where he was like, no, it's no big deal. For him, and we talked about it later, and it was actually very interesting because we both got triggered in our own separate ways. And I'm going to speak on Brandon's behalf since he's not here, but he got triggered as to back in the old days when, like, going through the McDonald's line where I had a hairline trigger and I was just ready to attack everything, and they would give the order wrong and I'd go back in and it triggered that. It triggered that kind of emotion from his childhood.
Sure.
And for me, it triggered the whole, like, no, if I'm going to buy something and I know my son is hungry, I want to provide that. So it was kind of perplexing all week, and I've been really thinking about it, and I just don't know the answer as to, in that kind of scenario, whose words would matter.
Well, I think maybe both of you maybe could have communicated more as to, like, why you both felt a certain way, but it was more of like, I want this. No, I'll do this. No, I'll do that. And then it was almost like this tug of war looking thing where neither of you could understand the other person's point of view because you weren't explaining it enough for the other person to understand.
Okay.
And I think both responses are valid, because obviously you don't want to lose money. And if, like you say, it's 15 minutes out of your way, like, what does it matter? But Brandon also doesn't want that kind of, it must not have, I mean, I'm sure Brandon was hungry, but it probably didn't bother him enough to, like, make you want to drive or make him feel like you needed to drive across town to fix a sandwich. Cause ultimately it's just a sandwich.
Right.
So I don't think there was a right or wrong thing. I think maybe a lack of communication on both parts.
Okay.
So I don't think anybody was right or wrong. I think there was just, there wasn't enough explanation for the other person to understand their side.
Right. And ultimately I didn't go back, and Brandon
ate the sandwich.
Well, yeah, he like rebuilt it onto some different bread. But Now, let me give one more scenario because this one actually involves you.
Sure.
So it was the seats on the airplane when we flew to San Francisco. Originally, you said that you wanted to pick some seats, and then I'm like, no, I want the window seat.
Yeah.
And so where I felt like my words weren't being listened to, as I was like, you know what? It was kind of selfish for me to say like, hey, I wanted the window seats. So if you want the aisle, I'm okay with that. And you're like, no, this is fine. And then I said it a couple of different times. And the reason that I said it a couple of different times is because I know that sometimes you have a tendency to just be like, fine, whatever, I'll do it. I just want this to be over. And I was trying to express in my words that, you know, I would have been fine in a middle seat. And I felt like what I was saying, I triggered you and you weren't listening to my words. And so that's another scenario of like, how do we fix that kind of like little communication issue?
I think, well, touching back on the airplane thing, I think it was just like, it, you know, like you said, I didn't get very upset, but I was upset because I'm like, just fucking listen, please.
Yeah.
You know, just please listen to me. Right. And it just didn't feel like you were. And then I was like, whatever, you know, we'll just make this 5-minute ordeal into 15 or 20 minutes. And it just like, I don't think there was enough. I don't know. I mean, how do you overcome? I mean, I don't want to overcook an easy meal and just be like, no, just pick the window. I'll pick the aisle. And you're like, well, what if we did this? Or what if we did that? And so I understand you were trying to like best case scenario this. Or I understand you were trying to put my needs in front of yours or anything like that. But I genuinely did not care. Okay. I was perfectly fine in the beginning with the aisle seat. And it felt like you were like, oh, okay, well, you're okay, but we're also going to like, let's explore this avenue. So I absolutely 100% did not feel like you listened to me at all. And, you know, and it was just like, hey, let's make something simple and then overcomplicate it. And then I got frustrated because it was overcomplicated because then we couldn't like find our original seats that we originally had because you had pressed all these buttons, even though I told you it was perfectly fine. And it just like, I got rather upset.
Right.
You know? Right.
So now, looking back at it objectively, you know, here's where, because I think that, and this is just my opinion. And again, I maybe I'm speaking for Brandon, but I just feel like sometimes, like I fight the ghosts of my past. Sure. And to me, it's like, okay, I know that I trigger you and Brandon quite often. And so I try to come at it in like a different way. Sure. But I still, sometimes I'm like, you know, and you and Brandon have a very valid point of like, you aren't listening to me, but it's a two-way street, I think, when you become an adult. Because sometimes I think that you and Brandon don't listen to the words that I'm saying because you're automatically assuming that I am back into that kind of old pattern. Sure. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, do you have an example of when that kind of happened, or is it just something how you feel constantly?
It's something where it's like, because I mean, those are the last two most recent instances where I'm like, you know, like with Brandon, I actually said, you're not listening to my words. Sure. And because he said, you're not listening to me. And I go, well, you're not listening to me. And so to me, there was that clear, like, that's what really brought up this subject, because it was like the clear, like, okay, now what do we do? You know, it's our communication has never gone past that. And I'm really very all about change, about evolving and communicating differently. And I Googled so many different things trying to find the answer to this question, and there really wasn't one. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I feel like, but I feel like there isn't an answer, because I don't think there's one person who's like right or wrong when it comes to like not communicating with each other, because like you both, like you said, you and Brandon and you and I both had valid points. And so I don't think there's a right or wrong thing. I think the only part where things are wrong is how we express how we feel.
Now, do you think it's how we express it or how we hear it? Do you think it's an ingoing or outgoing thing?
Both. I think both. You know, because you could be like, well, I just said, you know, I could pick the middle seat and you could take the aisle, you know, blah, 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 blah. But the way you perceive, or the way you meant it and the way I perceived it are two different things.
Right.
You know, I think it's like you say, it's either past trauma or past experiences that make me like autofill these responses, or it could also be like, you know, me past experience too, me not being able to articulate how I'm feeling or why I'm feeling this way. So I don't think there's a right or wrong thing. And I don't think it's like a chicken and egg thing.
Okay.
You know, I don't think there's a one size fits all answer.
Okay. Because I have, again, I left the sandwich and it ended up getting eaten. But I kind of looked at it myself. I'm like, well, Lonnie, you're the mom. You know, your needs of your child need to come in front of you, which is an absolute, truth. But again, when I look at my child, they're not 5.
Yeah, I was gonna say that would be the answer if Brandon was 6.
Exactly. Yeah. And that is where, and again, it was like this topic for me was so multi-layered. Every time I thought I had the answer, it ended up going to a different question.
Sure.
And that's why, I came to that conclusion. I mean, it's like telling Brandon that, you know, crossing the street without looking both ways, I'm right. He needs to listen to my words for your safety. But this isn't the scenario that we're in. So I'm going into this as looking at this dilemma as us being adults, not the parent-child kind of like.
I mean, you'll always be our mom, but the way in which we perceive things and the way in which we communicate things are that of adults.
Right.
So and I think, you know, I know the therapist had touched on it, but because you really weren't given the opportunity to experience like that motherhood through childhood and things like that with addiction and, you know, growing up and things, I don't know if it's over mothering sometimes, you know.
See, and it absolutely was. And I 100% will be like, yes, guilty as charged, you know, absolutely 100%. But to me, probably the most freeing thing and the most growing thing for me is looking at you and Brandon as adults now. So that's why I really am going into this question and this conversation as to like, how do we as adults go forward from here? Because again, every time I think like we reach a milestone, another one kind of like presents itself.
Well, you'll never ever be in a position where you're like, oh, okay, cool, we made it.
Yeah.
Now we fully understand everyone. It's just challenges,
Yeah.
you know, and it's just how we perceive and how we overcome the challenges that makes the growth happen.
Right. Right. So one of the things that I found through my research is that when you're in that kind of like scenario where we're trying to pick out an airplane seat or Brandon doesn't get the right sandwich, we have to find a common ground where we can, you know, we both kind of meet in the middle. But that's nothing. I mean, we've never done that before. We've never, you know, I would retreat into my corner, you know, going right back to childhood trauma. You and Brandon would just retreat back into you like, well, there's my mom again. She just doesn't listen to me. So I am going to go forward in hopes of finding a common ground. And again, just being like, when those triggers start popping up and I don't feel like my words are being heard, I need to just be like, stop. And so where the quiz is going to come in is because again, like I said, this led to so many different questions for me, is I consider myself a good listener. Okay. You might disagree.
Sure.
100%.
I'm just thinking back. Yeah.
Okay. But okay, let me just put it this way. I would hope I'm a good listener. In reality, I'm probably not.
I think your intentions of being a good listener are there.
And truthfully, intentions, I think for me are my downfall.
Okay.
Because I all day long can say, well, I have good intentions and justify my actions and go along and skip along my merry way.
Sure.
And I don't want to be that way because I don't want my intentions to be my my safety net.
Okay.
So I would love to be a good listener, and I know in my heart I do try. And I also too know in my heart that sometimes I'm not a good listener.
Sure.
And so, but to me, it's like there's also two different types of scenarios where we're listening. Okay, so now let's just say X calls you up and he's like, hey, dude, I got a problem. And you'd be like 100% hyper-focused and you would be there and you'd be there. Because when you and I talk, I think, you know, and here's the thing, it's like, and I'll be completely transparent with you. When I go in to have a conversation with you, I'm already like, on edge because I for one thing, I want to respect your space. I want to make sure like I don't come in kind of like rambling. I want to make sure I don't trigger you. So I already come in with like this, like almost like a like this predetermined speech. And
Okay.
I become so hyper focused on what I'm saying that I don't listen.
Okay.
So, but what I'm trying to get to and where this test is coming in, it's like when we are in, okay, so I got a little mixed up.
Okay.
So listening to a friend is super easy.
Mm-hmm.
Listening to somebody that you already are triggered by and you have past trauma with, I think it's more difficult to be a good listener.
Sure.
Do you agree?
Yeah.
So the quiz that I came up with was, are you a good listener?
Mm-hmm.
But I thought we could take the test based on like you talking to me and me talking to you.
Okay. So you and I are taking this test as if you and I are talking with each
Exactly.
other. Okay.
Because I like, again, I think it would be super easy to take this test thinking like, oh, you know what, if X called me up. So let's just say you're in your room and you're in your office and I'm like, hey, Robert, can I interrupt you for a minute and ask you this question?
Sure.
I'm going to, and then also too, it's going to be like, you're coming to me with like, a scenario of where sometimes you've come to me with a question or like something and I'll be like, blah, 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 blah.
Okay.
I'm going to see if I'm a good listener then. Okay. So and there's only 10 questions. So I'm going to read the questions.
Yeah. And then we'll both answer them at a time.
Okay. Yeah. It says, do you respond to text while people are talking to you?
So this is why I was worried.
Yeah, no. I mean, we could go fast. I mean, it's a A or B answer. You know, I'm just trying to think. I mean, so no. Oh, I guess I shouldn't say the answer. Do people come to you often with their problems? And then the next one, number 3, is, do you consistently compare people's point of views? Do you maintain eye contact while someone is talking to you? And then do you ask questions while people are speaking to you? And then it says, do you interrupt people while they are talking or do you wait for them to complete? Do you nod in between the conversations or say, okay? On a scale of 1 to 10, how patient are you? Imagine you get a phone call in the middle of an intense conversation. What do you do? Does your mind wander when others are sharing their thoughts with you? Did you easily get distracted by your surroundings? Okay. Mine says,
so you click I'm done with the test and then it tells you.
Yeah.
Does it tell you?
No. What did yours say?
It says, sorry, but your listening skills definitely need some improvement. It says, calculating this skill will not just help you personally, but professionally as well. You'll be able to focus better, and this will ultimately improve the quality of your work. So it's better that you start listening.
Okay. Well, I keep on saying I'm done, but it's not.
Let me see.
Right there. So apparently I'm
do you have like a pop-up blocker or something? Because it pops up.
Oh. Apparently I'm such a good listener that it didn't.
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, that's kind of a bummer.
Well, do the test real quick. Do it again. Just refresh it and do it again.
Okay. So what did you think about it saying like that you're not a good listener?
Well, if we're doing the scenario when it comes to you and I would agree that I'm not a particularly great listener.
Yeah.
You know, because a lot of times I feel like my time isn't valued, so I kind of phone it in. Or I feel like it's a problem that can easily be fixed and I don't necessarily need to be there, so I phone it in kind of thing.
Okay. Well, I'm going to tell you right now, my little quiz thing didn't really work for me. Let me take it on your phone, if you don't mind. Because I'm going to tell you right now, I'm not a good listener. I some of the answers, as far as I was concerned, I know that I was like, gosh, I don't want to have that one. Okay. You can talk to him.
So listening is good. And I think I think next time we should absolutely do this test first.
Well, I wanted to do it in the right way.
Okay.
So, I mean, and that's just the whole thing. I mean, this is an organic conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And on this episode particularly,
Mm-hmm.
I wanted it to be where we came up to our conclusions, organically.
Okay.
So I'm on number 8. So I would, okay. So mine says it didn't pop up. I'm okay. I'm not going to continue to do this because
Yeah, I don't know.
apparently it won't let me take the test. But just answering some of the questions, it's like, do you get easily distracted? And I know for me, it's like sometimes I'll be talking to you and you'll like, I know that you're busy and you have a lot of things going on. But when that happens, I'm just like,
Yeah.
And sometimes, and truthfully, sometimes I think like you focus more like on your Discord and stuff like that, because I don't know, maybe I make you, I irritate you or make you uncomfortable or something.
I just there's 1,000 moving parts, and sometimes I feel like you ask me questions that you could easily figure out on yourself, and sometimes it feels like my time isn't as valuable as yours. And so I get defensive because I'm like, oh, well, like if I go out and get water, then she might like drag me in and I might be stuck in a conversation and things like that. So I get very defensive sometimes, because I do feel like, I think honestly, I don't think it's a two-way street sometimes, and so I get a little on guard.
You see, because I absolutely agree with you, because I don't think it's a two-way street, because I mean, I know recently you have withdrawn so much. It's like, I almost feel like I have to write you a letter to even be able to communicate with you. So it
makes me feel better. Everyone, you're not the only person who feels like that. I just don't have time.
Yeah. And you know what? And truthfully, it's like, I again, trying to be a good listener and to understand you and what you have to do, I just be like, yeah, he's not here to entertain you, Lonnie. And here's the thing is that, Robert, I would rather have you just be like, hey, you know what? I got 1,000 things going on. I just don't have time to talk to you. Instead of you coming out on guard and being defensive, because it just leaves me kind of like, kind of flapping in the wind of like, what did I do?
Sure.
Why is he mad at me? And then it takes me using my energy to try to figure it out.
Okay.
And so, I don't know. I mean, we're 2 adults living in the same house, and that's just all it is. We're just 2 adults living in the same house.
Sure.
I just don't think that you need to feel like you need to isolate yourself in order to not be irritated by me.
Well, it's not necessarily isolated. It's just there's just a lot to be done. There's a lot of things to do, and you're not the only person like trying to like not, I don't want to say take my time, that's the wrong word, but you're not the only person who's coming to me with problems and things like that.
See, but here's the thing is I haven't been coming to you with any problems.
Okay.
You know what? I told you what I was going to do with my Amazon and all of that. And you know what? Right now I am in the middle of that transition, and I am bound and determined to do it myself.
Okay.
So you have this preconceived notion that I'm just coming with you and I'm bombarding with, trying to take your time. And truthfully, I'm not.
Yeah, but so you're saying you've never done that or what?
Absolutely. In the past I have. And I understand where you have those walls up because I was so rude and I was so overbearing about my time being more important than yours that I get where this is coming from. But it just is like at one point you have to see it for what it is today instead of what it was 6 months ago or a year ago.
But like, I don't understand what you mean. Like you think that like you've never come to me with like any like problems or like that I'm making this stuff up or what?
And I just said, absolutely, I have. But ever since we have started on this journey of communication and me knowing how you were feeling invalidated because instead of Googling it or trying to figure it out myself, I would just come to you and be like, fix my problem.
Mm-hmm.
I don't do that anymore. I mean, I told you what I was doing. I've asked you some technical questions, but I'm doing this on my own.
Okay.
And you said to me yesterday, you're like, well, if you get stuck, just let me know.
Sure.
So if I get stuck and I ask you a question, that's not bombarding you with problems. That's me listening to your words. You offered your assistance.
Okay.
And if I take you up on that, I don't think it's very fair if you're like, well, there she goes again. She thinks my time isn't as valuable as hers.
Yeah, but one instance I don't think qualifies for everything, though. You know?
And again, I 100% am validating what you're saying, that yes, I did that. And what I'm just asking for is you to be able to see me going like, oh, look, she's trying it herself. She has listened to what I said. She values my time. Because trust me, it would be much easier if you did it all for me. Instead of it taking me 2 days, it would probably take you 30 minutes. But I'm not going to do that because I want to do it myself.
Okay.
So what I'm saying is that actions speak louder than words. And in communications, to me, that action of me trying to do this myself is me saying, Robert, I value your time. Because a couple of weekends ago, you're like, my weekends are my weekends and I just need to decompress. So I'm just like, well, no, I'm not going to interrupt him. I'm not going to ask him to come and do this for me.
Okay.
So, and that's all I ask. Only thing I ask is for, yes, I 100% admit that I gave you zero space.
Sure.
And I gave you zero amount of respect for your time. I did that, but I am actively not doing that now.
Okay.
And so, and that's where I get sad is like, sometimes I feel like I'm jumping up and down and just being like, look, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it because to me, it's, again, words are words, but actions are actions. And I've really, really, really tried to never, ever even interrupt you in your office. You know, I might WhatsApp you and ask you if you want a Starbucks, but I don't go in there. I don't go in your room.
You have before. You did last week with the audio thing with the podcast.
Okay.
You know?
Were you in the middle of something?
I don't remember the context of it, but I mean, I'm just saying that like it does happen though. I'm not trying to devalue and things like that, but it, you know, like I said, like sometimes it's hard, and sometimes it feels like I'm always the one that has to have the solution, and it does get tiring sometimes.
Well, you are the one that went to college, and you're the one that has a degree in this. So you know what? In the past, you've been like, you know what? You don't appreciate my knowledge, and I do appreciate your knowledge. And when I ask, I don't know. I mean, I'm not going to get into this, but it just feels like, literally, it's like no matter what door I pick, it's the wrong door.
Okay.
So to me, at one point, I'm just going to stop opening the doors.
Okay.
There's nothing more I can do. There's nothing more I can just be like, there's just nothing more. So, I mean, I love you dearly and I respect your time and your space, but, you know, I just don't know what more, you know. So in the whole context of whose words are more important, you know, you're saying your words are more important. Am I wrong?
In what way though? Like how, like,
because, okay, so it's all about listening, and it's about listening.
Okay.
And it's about speaking, you know, you speaking your truth. And you know what? Instead of getting triggered by what you're saying, I'll listen to what you're saying, but I cannot control how you feel.
Okay.
I cannot control if if my action triggers you, because only thing I can do is in my heart, I can only do the best I can do. You know what? And that's just it. I just have to live my true life. And if it affects you negatively, I apologize now for that.
Okay. Yeah. And then I will do my best to not jump to conclusions.
Yeah. You know, that's all I ask. It's like, again, it's like, and this is the part of growing, and this is the part of like breaking down old habits and old communication issues and trying to make new ones. Yeah. And I'm okay with getting upset, and I'm okay with getting my feelings hurt, and I'm okay with like having things being told to me that don't feel great in order to push past that. because I've lived too long of my life in a fairy tale kind of existence where I can be like the constant victim, or I can be like, well, I tried, or, I did my best. I don't want to live in that scenario anymore. I want to live in a functioning, healthy scenario. And if, like I said, and if being told things that aren't pleasant or good to hear, then that's just something that's going to happen. But on the same token, Robert, I mean, it's like the only thing, I mean, and again, I can't make you do anything, but it would be nice if you would just not have that preconceived notion and just try to see it a little bit more for what it is.
I will take that to heart.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's all you can do.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So that was today's episode. And hopefully, and at the end of the day, truthfully what it is I think that it's just communication, and it's listening, and it's not only is it listening, but it's talking, and you just have to, say the things that you need to say in a non emotional way sometimes, and just hopefully the other person hears your words.
Yeah.
All right. So you can find Robert on Instagram as Robert Pike, and he is Sherbert on both TikTok, YouTube, and Twitch. And I, of course, am Gray Hair and Tattoos.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Mom.
You're welcome. All right, everybody. Have a great week, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.